Hello and welcome to PocketWatch, the show where we deep dive on some of the best and worst film and TV available to us in the multiverse. My name is Gus, and today we try not to lose our heads over the latest revelation in the latest episode of Marvel's Loki. I am, of course, talking about episode 4, the Nexus event. As usual, I'm joined by a couple of co-hosts to help me break down the episode scene by scene and see what makes it tick. First of all, joining me is someone who I would gladly share a Nexus moment with, gladly sitting here on a moon rock with you here at the end of all things. It's Peter Burns.
Yes! Damn it.
Because I'm mixing Lord of the Rings with Marvel. I'm really messing with the timelines here.
Good. Nice.
I thought you'd appreciate that. And as well, he's a self-confessed narcissist who regrets cutting women's hair for lols. It's Nick Richardson.
Hi.
I hope that wasn't too real, dude.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It was actually, it was very clever and very witty, and you're very nice, and screw you.
You have learnt your lesson, though, about cutting hair, and you didn't have to be in a time loop prison for it, I assume.
That's true.
Very good. Gentlemen, today, as I said, we'll be talking about Ep 4, the Nexus event. Of course, like always with this series, this will be filled with spoilers. We'll be breaking down the whole episode, talking about theories, about speculations, things we liked, things we didn't like. So if you haven't seen the episode already, or if you haven't seen the whole series, you should go back and watch that. And then you can, of course, watch the previous episodes of Pocket Watch we've done on this series thus far. Let's jump into it with a quick little explainer of the episode that comes on the little Disney Plus synopsis, which always feel a bit wrong. This one says, Ep 4, frayed nerves and paranoia infiltrate the TVA as Mobius and Hunter B-15 search for Loki and Sylvie. Which makes enough sense. I don't know if they were searching for Loki and Sylvie. They pretty much find them straight away, but we'll get into that when we break down the whole episode. But I also want to break down the temperature of how we're all feeling about the episode and maybe the series thus far, starting with you, Nicholas.
I'm definitely back on board with this. After the disappointment of last week's episode being a ton of unmotivated character stuff and just nothing really happening but the appearance of development, I think that a lot of this episode was fun. It pushed the plot forward. It pushed the characters forward, which is even more important. It just felt like we're back on track with things happening that I can kind of go, okay, most of this makes sense. Whereas our big complaint last week was none of this makes sense. Why is any of this happening? So there were still definitely issues with this episode, but I liked it way more than last week, and I feel like I'm back on board the Loki train.
Nice, which is so ironic because we're literally
not
off
the train from last
week. On that train. But good use of a metaphor. Peter, are you back on the train that we're off again? That we're back on again?
Not particularly.
He's on the train.
I'm on the train.
He's still
on the train of the pain train.
That exploding spaceship.
Yeah. I mean, give me the sweet relief of exploding in the destruction of a planet.
Oh, that's so grim. You were looking at it going, I wish I was on that when it exploded.
No, I'm not hating it. It's just nothing's landing for me. It's like I'm finding it pretty underwhelming. And I think like it's done some damage itself. I think there's still some good plot ideas, but I think the execution is always underwhelming, whether it's in dialogue or in action. I'm finding it hard to love this because I think it could be done so much better, and I don't know why it isn't, because they have Disney money.
They have Disney money. Yeah, look, it's tricky sometimes. It does feel a bit clunky from time to time. I'm with Nick. I'm back on board. I had low expectations after episode 3, and so I think that elevated my enjoyment of this episode. I enjoyed that it was back to character development, that it was quite literally back to the TVA, a location that I just enjoyed being in, even though it was those 3 sets being used again.
Yeah, I think we get one extra room.
Yeah, it's the same room. It's the same room again. But again, Disney money. What's going on there? Let's reuse that hallway. I liked being back there. I obviously liked, Owen Wilson, Ravona, those characters again. I think they were definitely missing from the previous episode. Overall, yeah, really enjoyed it and had some cool big Marvel-y moments, I guess, which we'll get into as we break down the episode. But yeah, overall, pretty good. I'm warm to hot. Nick's warmish, and Peter cold as usual.
Cold as usual.
Cold, distant, and
cold up here.
No one's going to draw attention to the fact that Gus described himself as hot, and the rest of us were not.
All right, well, let's move on from that quickly. And we'll do a break. we'll do a breakdown scene by scene of the episode, starting with the pre-title sequence, which was a bit of a flashback. We head to Asgard and we see a young Sylvie who's plucked from her home and arrested for crimes against the sacred timeline by, in fact, Ravona Renslayer, who is a hunter and not the judge she obviously turns into that we see later on. She's plucked out of her home and taken to the TVA, where she goes through the same sort of like induction that we saw Loki go through in the first episode. It's kind of like, meant to be sort of scary and torturous for her. And so we see this poor little young girl going through all these bureaucratic processes, leading to her being put in front of a judge, where she swiftly escapes, steals a temp pad, and disappears through an elevator. And therefore, we see her origin story, where she obviously, her backstory that was explained. A big part of that being that she clearly was from Asgard. She is probably a Loki. Was that a revelation to you, Pete? Or do you think that was something that you were pretty much on board with from the beginning when we first met her?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think from at least from the show, what the show has given us, she's always been a Loki in my mind. Like, I don't know anything about the comics and I'm not like into fan theory sites and stuff, so I know there's been some speculation on the internet that she wasn't, but like I think everything the show has said to us is that she is a Loki, so that's been my understanding of her the whole time.
Fair enough. I mean, Nick, you've dived a bit more into some of the fan theory stuff you brought up, that Enchantress, Sylvie, all that kind of stuff, but I think they're pretty much cementing here that this is her origin story, and we're gonna just cement this as fact.
Yeah, which I think is interesting. I think she'll probably become Enchantress. It just seems very strange for Marvel to take a name from a character that's not actual, that's like a different character, and apply it in the setting. That's just kind of seems confusing. But yes, she is a Loki in this scenario. I really liked this opening scene. I think. I think it was actually really effective seeing the TVA through the eyes of a child. And Gus, I think that we'd sort of mentioned this before, that you were like, I think you said that you were a little like, it felt a little forced or something to you. But I think it was so funny in that first episode. It was such a strong open to the show. But then going, oh yeah, that's because he's like this god who's like, all of you are beneath me, and like, what is going on? This is all dumb.
Sure. But
going as a child, going into this system, it's actually, this is terrifying. And I think that obviously because we now know more about what the TVA is, then we go, okay, well, we can sort of see behind the curtain on that. And
they're very. Sorry, you go.
No. Yeah, finish up there.
I was going to say, they are turning into the bad guys either through like plot development, but now we're seeing some actions as well. I think I got hung up on this little moment where she sees a guy being like pinned and sort of restrained, and she screams like, "Help him!" And you're like, "What?" And it's this awkward scene where a guy's just in like modern day clothing. The rest of it, I agree with you. Her going through the little X-ray machine and stuff, and in the little jumpsuit and stuff. It's sweet, but it's terrifying, and anyone putting a child through that would be, they are the villains. So
I just think like you're totally right. And again, it's like that perspective shift is like an interesting, because they pretty much blatantly say that the TVA are Nazis in this. It's like, this is just fascism. The machine is fascism, and it's like, that's fine, and that's a cool twist. That's a cool like thing to do with your story. But it's like, I don't know if it's always a timing thing for me. It's always pacing. It's like they spent 40 minutes last week doing fucking nothing, and then they only give this, where this should have been more of the episode. It was like, and it was only the 2 minutes before the titles, and it's like they rushed all that. And it's
totally.
It's execution stuff like that. It's like, sure, I can go, okay, that's what happened, and I can extrapolate, but it's like, at least show me that. Show me more. Like, let me be in that mood. Because you're not allowed to be in that mood for long enough before this title sequence plays, and it's the classic fanfare back this week of the dun, 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 like the Marvel thing. It's like this superhero music all of a sudden. Okay. It's like last week they changed the mood of that title sequence, and that was a cool thing to do. This week could have been like a dour mood, but it was just like up and at 'em.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I did see one interesting fan theory going around that this show basically is about how can Loki be redeemed? And it's like, are people all good or all bad? What are the shades in between? Blah, blah, blah. And we haven't got a lot of explanation as to why variants get plucked. And the big question when this was happening, I was like, there's just this kid sitting there playing with the toys, and suddenly like the Nazis turn up and are like, oh, you're dead now. It's like, why? And I saw a really, really interesting theory online where basically at the beginning she is playing with a dragon and a Valkyrie toy. And she says the dragon is attacking, but the Valkyrie flies in and slays the dragon and saves Asgard. And there's a theory online that basically the variants, the Loki variants get pruned when they become good people. And that Loki is destined to be a villain. And so anything that a Loki does that puts them on the path of not being a villain is not in accordance with what the Timekeepers needed. So in that moment, that was her going, actually, she wants to save Asgard, not blow it up. So now you need to be removed because you've made the choice to be good, not bad. And
that's really interesting.
I'm like, that's an interesting idea that the free will is being removed, and that like that would mean that Loki never had a choice to not be quote unquote a villain, because every time he chose to not be a villain, they pruned a variant version of him, and he was only ever destined to go down that path. And I thought if that's true, that's an interesting take on that.
It definitely holds up in terms of what we see when those two characters are talking, and just like, you know, a little bit later on in the episode itself, like speculating that Lokis themselves are, you know, doomed or fated to always fail, but survive and always, and therefore be more of a villainous character. It is strange that, like, you know, our Loki gets plucked out when he not does something good, but like does something quite monumental. This is a child going, what if this toy was the good one? And they're like, no, that was exactly it. That was, you know, the moment they dive on her, it's just like her, you know, having just a change of heart playing with her toys. So, totally. But yeah, that's an interesting theory. The other thing we did see at those little pre-title sequence is we then see Ravona reporting to the Timekeepers themselves. So I think this is in a flash forward. So we've had that little flashback, and we then see her in modern day stepping through the elevator, and we get our first little glimpse at the Timekeepers themselves in what I will say is fucking awesome as a setup of this like cool misty fog room with these three statuesque characters, neon backlit kind of thing. Like I love that, and I was like, cool, there is something here in the sense that we've all been speculating for a while. Do the Timekeepers, you know, is it there's nothing behind the curtain? I like that there's at least something that will be revealed later on as well.
Lizards.
So lizards. Well, I'm trying to remember when everyone was like, there are three lizards running everything. It must have been in the first or second episode, but like in the cartoon form, because they are space lizards essentially, which is to be revealed later on. But that was a cool little tease to what's coming later in the episode. And then we'll dive into the modern day, or where we're up to at least in the series, when Ravona then returns from her meeting with them and has a little back and forth with Agent Mobius. Yay, great to see Owen Wilson back, because the episode really struggled without him, I would say. And they have a little back and forth where Mobius is kind of pleading with her to reveal what she learnt from the Timekeepers, but also to get access to Hunter C-20, who was the younger girl who got, we saw sort of her mind plucked and had information extracted.
She was taken at the fair, and her mind, oh my god, her mind was mined.
Her mind was mined for data, and she revealed how to get access to the Timekeepers. And now that's why Mobius wants to find out from her what Sylvie could actually do. It is then revealed by Ravona that she's like, C-20 is dead. Her mind was slowly scrambled and was unraveling, and it led to her dying, which is a pretty unconvincing thing to be told off screen. That happened off screen, and that kind of shakes Mobius a little bit. So we're already starting to see we've got levels of manipulation and subterfuge and lies and all this kind of stuff possibly being laid out in front of us. Everyone happy to see Mobius back, I assume?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, it's just delightful. And then we'll move back to Lamentus, where we see that Loki approaches Sylvie, and they are sitting waiting out the end of the world as the planet slowly encroaches to kill them. And that's where we get Sylvie, who does reveal that she was in fact born as a goddess of mischief. She tells her backstory to Loki and tells the story of what we basically just saw. We get a little bit of character development there, but again, not much considering that we had so much time on this moon or this planet. And basically that she grew up in the end of a bunch of worlds. She grew up in a lot of apocalypses. And personally, I want to jump in here and just say that this scene felt like something that for me should have happened when they fell off the train in episode 3. There was that scene where they were ejected from the train, they crushed the tempad, the all is lost moment. This would have been the redeeming character development scene versus them going on a weird bit of a foot adventure to get to that stupid ending scene from episode 3. Does anyone
totally feels like they've taken this scene that should have been the end of last week's episode. And the end of last week's episode would have been the doors appearing behind them and they turn, and then that's like credits. Because it's like we knew that they weren't going to die. So this was the cap to the character development. Like the character development episode was so weak in our opinion because there was no character development. Whereas this actually does some level of like cementing that they have become closer to each other and that they are accepting their fate and are at least thankful that they're there together. And I'm like, well, that's all the stuff that was missing in last week's episode of going that their relationship didn't progress at all. So it feels weird that this is starting this episode as opposed to ending last week's episode.
Totally.
Yeah. I think part of what doesn't work about this scene for me was like, it's the casting. I just don't think that Sylvie is strong enough.
No.
And maybe it's not that, and maybe it's not the actor, maybe it's her in this setting, or I don't know, but like she gets given these monologues of like, you know, this monologue about how sad her life has been jumping between the ends of worlds, and now here she is going to die at the end of a world, and how fitting that is. And it's like, maybe the words are good enough if they were delivered properly, but it just fell so flat to me. And I think part of it's her costume as well. It's like she just looks like she's a cosplayer
walked out of a convention or something. Yeah.
And it's just like these moments that are meant to have so much impact. I'm just like, really, I don't care.
She never stepped into the show with enough kind of like pizzazz or like curiosity about who this character is. She needed to be just like, as you said, both in the costume department and maybe in the mannerisms, needed to just be like firing on all cylinders. So you're like, what an interesting addition.
I'm just so confused about what the character is.
Totally. So that when she does have this more sad, somber moment, it looks contrasted to how she has been acting up until that point. But up until this point, I found her, as I said, a very standard performance, and I would say a pretty underwritten character. I don't think it's the actress's fault. I think, it just feels like a miscast. So in these scenes,
it's a wishy-washy role. It's like it was established as this massive threat. We meet her, and she's a fool who can't execute her plan, and is stumbling around with our other fool, Loki, and then we're meant to believe that she's powerful, but we only ever see her fail, and then she just has this moment of weakness, and then it's like, well, like that there is no contrast. You're right. It's like that's where maybe that could have been purchased. You know, like that's.
And it's also like later in this episode, we see her like when she's in the prison cell and she's got like her feet up and she's all cocky when like Ravona walks in and sees that she's been like, I'm jumping ahead, but it's like that character, right? So where's the cockiness coming from this character who previously is just like, I fucked up everything, and it's all like it's just there's no, they haven't nailed down the tone, and
I wasn't strong enough in either direction.
Yeah, I do want to explain why I burst out laughing before. That's just because I'm looking at the rundown that Gus put together, and there's a note here that says Sylvia reveals, in fact, she was born as a goddess of mischief and is another Loki. But what Gus has actually written is born as a goddess of mischief, Micheff, and he's capitalized the M. And so when I read this, I was like, did I tune out for a second?
What planet?
She's a goddess of the planet Micheff. And I was like, well, I don't remember this at all. And then when you said it, I was like, right, that's what's happened.
No, what
I would
you're
say
getting
it's cruel
wrong
to
is
pick up that. I would say it's cruel to pick him out on that, but he did throw you under the bus at the start of the episode by calling
Thank
you
you
a
very much.
hair-cutting narcissist. So
That's true.
And I only did it because I was like, I burst out laughing at something that Gus said, which was not funny, and so therefore it's like the audience would be like, why is he cackling? Okay,
It was, in fact, a typo. She was born, in fact, as a goddess of McAuliffe, the Australian comedian. So, you got to get that right. In that little sort of misstep of a moment, I did draw attention to it before, that Loki then has a sort of, a pep talk of sorts to her, which she says, no pep talks, please. But he does basically say to her that Lokis are kind of destined to always fail, but we never die, we always survive, which is kind of setting the groundwork for something you mentioned before, Nick, which is that, Loki is on this path of self-discovery and, failed redemption, essentially, because this is just what they are fated to be, which we're going to obviously learn as we meet more Lokis, I'm sure, later down the track. The reason the reason they are saved, I should say, is because there's a moment, quite a tender moment, just before, I agree with everything you said about the actress playing Sylvie, but she does some good eye acting. There was quite a sad moment. Any character that realizes I'm about to die, that was convincing.
better fuck myself.
That's what I'm gonna do.
We'll get there. There's a little tender moment, and of course that causes a very sharp branching off the sacred timeline, which is observed by Mobius and the team back at the TVA.
It's basically an incest meter. And
an incest meter goes off the charts, and they therefore are able to track them down.
It's just masturbation.
Oh,
I think as soon as it's in another body, it's incest.
Okay.
Whatever it is.
That's the rule.
Yeah. It's identical twins.
At the very least, this is a disembodied stranger. If it is masturbation, it's at least that.
So the self-masturbatory meter goes off the charts, and which is self-implying it's another self, not yourself. Anyway, we're off topic. They are saved. The moment is ruined by that. But yeah, they are saved by the two elevators opening, and we are taken back to the TVA. Once they return, they are split up for obvious reasons now, and they're by themselves.
We can't pry them apart.
We can't leave them in a cell.
They are
each other's senseless. Oh god!
Oh dear! They are split into different cells, and Loki and Mobius get a nice little kind of reunion. A nice little reunion of sorts. But we do see Mobius totally drops his what is referred to as his folksy, dopey exterior, and instead just calls out Loki as an asshole and a bad friend. I got some serious Hansel vibes from Zoolander there when he's like, "You're just a bad friend," and I'm like, oh, he has that real just I'm such a genuine guy kind of vibe, which again, lovely to see. Owen Wilson's character back, but then feel bad that suddenly he's been burnt by Loki, so he throws him into a time loop prison of sorts, but not before Loki does tell Mobius, he's like, the TVA is lying to you, which is his meaningful line, and then we get Loki in this time loop prison, which I explained earlier, or I was joking before, where with Nick, where we see it's a moment in his past where Sif, the character from Asgard, basically confronts him about a prank he pulled and beats him up, and then it's on loop constantly. I really liked this. I thought it was a cute little use of a condensed space, which we've seen a lot of in this show. Nick, as someone who's...
and a fun use of time travel, which the show is built around, and so far it mainly just uses to get people out of scenarios. And this was if I'm a time cop and I have access to time loops, then this is the kind of
this is the kind of time torture that I'm into.
Exactly, yeah.
Totally. And guys, just quick question. What would be your worst time loop prison?
Oh, God. I have so many. I have so many. And none of them are really bad things I've done. They're all the moment that you realize you stepped over the line just a bit. The haircutting thing, of course, which has been referenced, is one of them. But so it's not the worst things I've done in my life. It's definitely just... 40 moments of going.
You're totally right. It's not this horrible moment. It's the time that I think I said to some friends I was really happy to see, but I went to say goodbye, and instead of saying ciao or bye, I went choi and turned around and didn't readdress it. And as I walked away, I'm like, I'm such an idiot.
Yeah,
I should have just
yeah.
said sorry. And I just said that. And like, I would relive that moment on
Joy.
loop, just going, Joy.
Yeah.
And then confidently walking away, being like,
in a
"Oh my God."
similar vein, it's you order takeaway food and they say enjoy your meal and you say you too as you take the food and walk
Yeah,
away.
it's exactly that.
And then you cut their hair and you're like, oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it was a cute little scene. It played out well. Pete, I want to get your take on the way that scene was shot.
I mean, I think the idea is cool. I think the execution was okay. It was just bad theater punches and stuff the first time.
Yeah.
I think they got the good angles on a couple of takes. It's just they had to do 50 takes of the same thing. But it's like the punches were just not landing. It's like it was such bad.
It's panto.
Like,
the action
the
in
show
the series is super panto. Yeah.
Yeah, the show doesn't know how to do action, combat, anything, which we will find out at the end of this episode.
which again is just like it's so world breaking to me. It's like you can do time travel, you can do whatever, but it's like the moment you see the production happening, and the production in this instance was punch like a foot wide of Tom Hiddleston's head because that's all insurance lets us do. Then it's like you've got the wrong camera angle on that because you just showed us that you didn't punch him. And we're meant to believe it. And then it's like huge performance from Hiddleston again of like throwing his head back, and it was all like Three Stooges stuff.
We'll point out that the captured time loop thing is entirely where he does at minimum 3 hair flips. 3 hair flips occur,
and a lot of chest
space.
breathing. A lot of chest breathing.
Yeah,
he does a lot of that. But yeah, I actually really like that. I usually hate when shows go for that really staged sort of just flat look when they film something, but I thought this worked really well because it kind of felt like she was walking around the back of the set to come back around each time, and it had like that Asgardian kind of theater vibe to it. So I found that was kind of sweet and a funny little moment again that we see. Moving on from that, we then head back to Mobius chatting to Ravona. He's kind of it goes back to this like cop and detective police station, like light coming through the blinds behind her kind of thing, where it just felt like a really natural scene from an on Earth scenario where basically Mobius is attempting to get Ravona to give him access to Sylvie. She denies him fully, and he's a little curious about what that's all about. And on his way out of the office, B-15 asks him what Loki told him. He tells him that the TVA are not to be trusted. So we already see the seeds of doubt being sort of spread both, or she already has some pre-existing feelings as to what's going on. Back in the time loop.
Can I just say as well, like,
I
like that B-15 obviously has had this moment in 2 episodes prior where she was mind hijacked by Sylvie, and you can see the effect of that.
Mind,
and you can see the effect of that immediately. Again, ideas are good, execution bad for me when it's like this moment of B-15 going like, what did he say? He said they're not to be trusted. It's like, that's not the clever way of doing that. It's not a piece of information drop that is like, ask you to connect 2 pieces of information. It's like, TVA bad. So she's like, okay, I accept that TVA bad because Loki said TVA bad. Not like something like, to get her to do a bit of problem solving and reach the conclusion that she's going to now go ahead and go like, I can't trust the TVA. This staunch, like literally the strongest hunter they've had this whole time
of all of their
turns
their
on a
guards.
dime.
Yeah.
And that's, I think like, the power of Sylvie is enough to go like, you can turn on a dime because I've unlocked part of your memory. But this scene is so redundant because it's like, she's either already there or she needs a piece of information to get her there. And this piece of information is so nothing to get her there. So it's like, come on, give me something.
It was like every single person that you've ever kidnapped from a timeline would be going, don't do this. Why are you well, you're the bad guy. I'm just trying to live my life. It's like she would have heard this a billion times. So the idea that this piece of information is anything new for her. And later on, you see a better version of what this is.
Totally. Yeah. I think, that's what I was thinking too. Is like later on we do get, as you said, a better version of this. So I'm a little more willing to forgive that. But that's a really good point, Pete, that, it is just like there should have been some more investigation done by a character that is, up until that point, a very stoic, very staunch kind of like believer in what the TVA does do. We then see back in the time loop prison that Loki finally breaks after being theater punched so many times by Sif, and has his little monologue about, or confession, I should say, that he's a narcissist and that he's afraid of being alone and that he just does things to get reactions, all that stuff we know he's well aware of. It was nice-ish to hear him sort of confess it, but I feel like at that point we're aware of the fact that this is how he feels. Nick,
it's so annoying. This is what the first episode was. This is the same. Yeah, it's the same fucking arc. Like, I'm in a time loop of character development. I don't understand why this is some moment where he falls apart and he's like, yes, I am a narcissist and I'm just trying to get... Like, you got fucking told this in the first episode. You denied it. You then watched yourself do awful things. You realized you're like that. You then, in the second episode, people kept telling you this. In the third episode, you went on this whole journey with the character. On the fourth, at the beginning of this episode, you had the thing where, like, yes, we're doomed to fail. And then you've had the same thing again. And it's just so weird that they keep doing this. Like, it's like he keeps... It's like he's fucking in Memento and keeps forgetting that he has had a momentous realization about his own personality and then has it again. It's bizarre.
Do you think it's one of those things that it's like, it's when Hiddleston and the character of Loki, it's their best character trick. It was really lovely in the first episode where he's beaten and downtrodden and finally gets around to being like, the Tesseract doesn't work, I'm alone, I'm bad. Like, they're nice moments, and they're the most powerful ones where this very sort of pompous theatrical villain is grounded. And I really like it. And now it feels like they're just like, well, that's a good scene. Like it just feels like we should do that more. Like, that's the best moments of Loki when he does that. But you're right. We're seeing it too much happen in a show that needs to be pushing other story threads and other character arcs forward. And they just keep falling back on it like a safety blanket. Like, those moments that Loki realizes that, maybe he should be a good guy are really powerful, but we're just getting too many of them, or we're just seeing them in too many ways.
It's bizarre. And I think that the part of the problem is that they went, that was his journey in the films, and it ended really well from a character development perspective. And then this show inherently needs to go back in time with the old version of him, but then it's like, it's not taking him on a different path. So it's like, well, this is just a different version of what happened in the movies. And I'm now realizing that it's like, oh, this is just he's going on the same emotional journey in the films. It's just, he's just taking a different path there. And that's like, take me on the version where Loki is successful in being a villain. Like, make that the TV show, because this is an alternate reality that doesn't actually impede on the movies at the moment anyway. So
or even in a maybe blander but still different version where he successfully is good, and you can rely on him being good and doing good things and using his powers in a good way. And seeing him, consistently fighting evil, where he's still just in this point of ambiguity, and it's like, that's what that character is, I guess, in mythology. But that story has been played out in the films. You're right. The MCU covered that, and now we're just getting the same story retrod.
Totally. Luckily, that kind of shifts from just a self-reflection to more of the stuff we mentioned earlier, when Mobius takes him out of the cell, puts him into a bit of a interrogation scene where the two of them have it out. And there's a little bit of kind of mind games going on in terms of, as they're trying to interrogate each other, Mobius wants to know what Loki's bigger plan was, to which he spins another story. I think I'm right in saying this, that he gives this weird kind of quite convincing left turn, but as an audience member, it was done without even a wink and a nod to us. I felt it was strange, where he basically says, all right, I don't want to go back in the cell. I'll tell you, both me and Sylvie hatched this plan years ago in Asgard, and this whole thing's coming together. And it was I don't know, if this didn't feel smart for me, because I was we don't understand what his through line is, which, again, we've mentioned this in previous episodes where we've thought, what actually is his goal of lying. And we said it's kind of just making it up on the fly, but it never feels that feels like a weird, page of the script that got read that wasn't meant to be or something. Yeah.
And again, from the show perspective, it's we're back at square one. This is episode 1 stuff. And it's
even in the same room.
In the same room. And Loki and Mobius have become friends. I believe, it's a condensed storytelling, because again, I think the pacing's all over the place, but I believe that Loki and Mobius have bonded in their time at the TVA. They spent more time at the TVA than we got to see, but they've done things together and they've formed a bond. And Loki just throws that out the door again in this scene to waste 3 minutes of screen time because he gets called out immediately. Because we're back at episode 1 where Mobius sees right through that bullshit.
Totally.
And like there's opportunity here for Loki Mobius to have some real dialogue, and they just go, oh, what's the alt version of a script that we had in episode 1 that we didn't use? Okay, just throw that in. They just keep him talking for 3 minutes.
It's weird because it's all motivated essentially by the fact that Loki has an allegiance with Sylvie, has an affection for Sylvie, which we see later in this conversation, and therefore he's willing to ditch all efforts to convince Mobius of what's going on for instead maybe a shitty lie that will try and that'll try and just misdirect Mobius in his investigation, essentially. And it's not like he either needs to be going hard on the whole, like, hey, I've worked it all out, I really need you to believe me. And he's like, I'll never believe you. But he's like, no, just go hammer and tongs on that point rather than throw a lie in the mix, because you're like, oh, you undo all the work you were just trying to do. And again, just because you feel you've got an attachment to Sylvie now.
Yeah, or for me, this was an opportunity, because I don't think we got this. It was an opportunity for him to go to Mobius and like actually confess his affection for the Sylvie and explain what that is, because like this has never happened before in the universe, right? It's like someone falling in love with themselves. And it's like, this is one person, this Mobius person is in a position to potentially understand, because they understand all of the time travel dimension stuff. There's a moment for two friends to have a real conversation about this like battle of narcissism and this affection he has for this other being that happens to be himself. And there's something really interesting happening, and they don't talk about it. And it's two friends that could, but don't.
Yeah.
And also, I just want to say that I think the other thing, and it's hard because I don't like being so nitpicky with something, but I feel like the nits that we constantly keep picking are the character development that they're trying to do. So before, when he gets thrown in the cell, he's like, oh, this is the part where Mobius is going to say, you're the god of screwing up, or you're the backstabber and whatever. And Mobius goes, no, you're just a really bad friend. And it cuts back to a reaction shot of Hiddleston where he's hurt by that. Like, he's actually like, oh God, that's not what I was expecting. That hurts. And then he gets thrown in the prison cell. It's like, cool, that's a nice moment. And then he comes out of the prison cell, and the first thing he does is lie to his friend.
Betray the friendship.
And it's like, I don't get, like, then why did that moment hit you? And it's also, it doesn't feel like he's lying because it's all he knows how to do. Because
you're right,
he knows
it doesn't show him
stuff.
It doesn't show him at odds with himself going like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't keep lying. It doesn't show him conflicted by the idea that a Loki is pre-programmed to lie and to twist and to manipulate, and that he's fighting that. That would be interesting to see him be like, just keep taking the lie every time there's a chance to, and then trying to pull back from it. He just says it so sort of calmly and confidently with, again, no real understanding of how that's going to progress either his, narrative or anything else. It's a weird decision there, I thought.
And then when Mobius says that actually Sylvie's been pruned, and sort of like they start delving into that relationship, I was like, okay, I like this scene. I like it in isolation. I like what's happening here. But I don't believe that this character has gotten there with Sylvie. The only moment that I feel like that showed us that was the opening of this episode where they're sitting there. But all of last episode didn't show anything where they were actually getting closer. So it's like he goes from literally like threatening to kill her and betray her on a planet to what is in theory 20 minutes later screaming like, did you kill her? And it's like, I don't understand how that he went a complete 180 in that amount of time. And even though the scene at the beginning of this episode was the most effective in terms of like that development, it's just like, you have gone from I want to kill you to you are the love of my life.
Or I want to know your plan it's weird that they make that jump there. I think what's probably more important, and they try to direct it towards this, is that, as you said, Pete, Mobius catches a whiff of his bullshit straight away, and therefore doubles down, and it proves that Mobius is a better liar than Loki, because that little lie tells him about her being pruned gets the reaction that he wants out of Loki, which is seeing that he does have some, affection and connection to Sylvie, which I'm with you, Nick. I like that scene. I like this scene from here in terms of where they then break down how exactly messed up that is. And we get some really nice lines from Mobius that, again, some Hansel vibes where he's like, you could break reality. You're breaking my reality right now. Like, it's just, but I'm with you, Pete. Like, you've kind of pulled the rug out from under my feet here, because I really liked him saying these lines like, what a seismic narcissist, you fell for yourself, all that kind of stuff. But like, he should know that's going to happen. He should have seen this kind of stuff in his time as an agent, or also just like knowing that this is this kind of character. He knows everything about Loki. Why does this surprise him? Like, I liked it on first viewing, and now I kind of question this dialogue.
I hate making these episodes because they always start with you guys being like, I found things that I enjoyed of it, and then the whole conversation we're like, here's what's wrong with this shit. But I think, like, to me, like, this whole show works better reading the plot on Wikipedia, because the plot ideas are really good, but the execution across the whole episode is which is why it's so nitpicky, right? It's like, things are going in the right direction, but they're getting there in all the wrong ways. And it's like, you take out the dumb decisions of dialogue and stuff, and it's like, okay, this is really interesting. So it's like, that's why we end up, I think, bogged down in these like downer moments.
Minutia.
Like,
totally.
Because there's a lot of it in the episode, and I find it hard to get past. But from a more holistic perspective, I think the plot is moving in an interesting direction for this show. Yeah. I think ultimately it is going to go somewhere interesting, but it's so easy to pull apart because I think they stumble at every hurdle. And it's just stumbles. They don't fall. It's just stumbles all the time. It's like, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why is this happening?
Like, which can feel more awkward than just a wrong turn. You can be like, this feels a little off. Which means we'll barrel through the next couple of scenes, because the crux of that interaction is that Loki does finally crack telling Mobius that everyone's a variant. The information that will be passed on to him. Mobius is obviously not convinced straight away, but he again sows the seeds of doubt there that everyone's a variant, that they weren't created by the Timekeepers. And back into the time loop prison he goes. Outside again, we then see another weird scene where, not weird, but like we talked about earlier, B-15, Hunter B-15 storms into Sylvie's cell looking like she's going to have a fight. But instead, there's a sort of she backs out and says like, no, I need you to follow me, and opens an elevator. So we see that she's now going to do some of that investigatory work that we talked about earlier. And then we head back to Ravona's office, where we see that Mobius and her are signing off on the case file. I'm not sure what part of them means that led them to be like, hey, well done, we've solved this now. I guess it's just
they're still in cells. It's like, it's not over.
I was like, this is a massive fuck up at every single level. Like, totally. Like, she dropped all these bombs in the timeline that set off these huge mass events, which we still haven't dealt with. Like, I don't know what happened.
Was that just dealt with on
spikes all over the timeline? And it's like, no, that's fine. They fucked off. They escaped multiple times. Your security is trash, but they're like, job well done, team.
So they've done a bad
Here's another
job.
Trophy. Yeah,
and it's not over. There's still
the
two Lokis in cells. They're not. They haven't been. Nothing's resolved, and they're having a drink to celebrate.
I guess
they've already broken out of these cells before.
I guess playing devil's advocate, it's that they've recaptured them and they have them both back at the TVA. Let's go with that for now, because I totally agree with you both that is a weird.
It's
clunky...
more like have a drink, sure, but they're like stamping files like case closed.
Sign here,
it's like,
well done.
It's well and truly open.
Look, it was like a sword prize or something.
You get another sword.
Where is this going to go?
For
on
what?
This perfect sword holder.
Employee of the month, here's your sword. It's weird. Look, maybe, and again, benefit of the doubt here, maybe it's just showing the cracks at the TVA, that it is not an efficient system and that there are all these flaws, and that they're happy,
or that she's trying to cover it up. That
totally, I think that's probably
what it is. Is like, But it was something I liked in the scene was that I think that Mobius and Owen Wilson just is so good at that thing of like trying to get information out of you while also appearing to like just be on your side. Like lots of his lines of like, isn't it weird that this happened? And then she's like, why do you keep asking these questions? He's like, and kind of laughs it off. And that he felt really good at that of like trying to get more and then pulling back and going forward again. He's so good in this show.
He is great.
I don't know why he's so good in this show. Like, I think he's been good in other things, but like he's always just Owen Wilson. But he's got a lot of like subtle performance going on that's really effective.
I think once
between
he's got that,
him and Gugu and Batharaw, it's like those scenes are always the best because they have like these powerhouse actors in a room together.
Yeah. I think he's that boyish charm that he's had his whole career is starting to sit really nicely with him aging, I guess, physically. Like now that he looks a bit more, he finally looks a bit more mature, having that kind of boyish charm. He's reaching a McConaughey-esque level of.
I was going to say, True Detective. Could cast
it's
him
it's mixing this kind of like interesting personality in the body of someone who looks like an interesting face and performance level, especially with like the costume design of him in this role.
Let that be a lesson to anyone who wants to make it big in Hollywood. Just break your nose really bad.
Break your nose,
and then get old.
Unless you're a woman, in which case then you won't be cast.
In that back and forth, we see him constantly still prying about what happened to Hunter C20. Ravona's still on her guard, but it's a bit of a playful interaction. And eventually, Mobius does the old switcheroo with her tempad because he clearly still doesn't trust her, and he manages to then sort of leave the office without her being too suspicious, we think.
Which is such a good moment. Like that's the best moment in this show is Mobius and Ravona, we know, have a really strong friendship. It's been established. And him betraying her, I mean, I guess there's like, it echoes, it rhymes, to quote George Lucas, of he's betraying his friend in the same way Loki, poetry, poetry, it rhymes, in the same way that Loki has betrayed him. Loki's doing it for selfish reasons. I guess Mobius is in a way trying to save himself because he doesn't trust the TVA anymore, but he's doing it for a greater good. So like, I guess if you look at those two characters kind of doing the same things in this episode in a way, at least Mobius is like, he's making this massive choice of not trusting a friend and betraying them to save for a bigger idea. Whereas Loki never is doing anything for a bigger idea. He's only doing it in the moment, in the heat of the moment, for himself.
Yeah. And then what follows is obviously for both him and Agent Hunter B15, we get two scenes back to back that are kind of revelation moments for the characters. The first being Hunter B15 demands that Sylvie show her again what she saw in the original mind mining scene, where they're back at actually that mall from the second episode, I believe, and that then Sylvie confesses, she's like, oh, you're all variants, and here's what your previous life looks like, and sort of shows her again in what I think was a really touching performance. I would have liked to have seen what she was seeing. I
think it's better that they didn't. I think this was one of the smartest directorial choices they've made in the whole show, and it was probably a budget thing that stopped us seeing some bullshit flashback. But I don't want to see that. Like the fact that she comes out and she goes, "I looked happy." That lands so well.
Yeah, and it's it's a wonderfully shot scene. The score is doing a lot of work there. There's a lot of rain and a lot of tears, but and a great performance by that character who, up until this stage, I think the actor's been great, but the character has been a bit kind of like, purposely made to be a stiff, stormtrooper. So that's the revelation for her. And then back in the library, we see Mobius kind of slinks between that same set and checks out the tempad and discovers that Agent C20, Hunter C20, I should say, was actually fine and was trying to convince the TVA of what she'd seen and that they are all variants. And then a really awkward sort of Ravona leans into shot, proving that she was there. She heard all this information. She obviously didn't give any of this information to Mobius.
Zoom and enhance on her face as well.
On retro pixel Game & Watch graphics.
I did love with this, when this scene was happening, I was like, why is he in the library? And I was like, because they didn't want to pay for a bathroom set, because normally this would be someone goes to a bathroom stall and that's where you get privacy, is like, no one's going to walk in here no matter what. And he's like, but let's just shoot it on the back of that scene we did a couple of weeks ago.
It's literally the same aisle that I think of the library. So he, therefore, I think through that revelation, loses all faith and trust in Ravona, and sets out to confront Loki about it. We head back to the time loop prison. Loki's still getting beaten up, and Mobius confronts him and says that, you were right the whole time. I'm your friend again. I believe you. We need to get out of here. Do you trust me? Blah, 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 blah. I'm happy. for me, it's like, great, okay, we moved on. We're back to what should have happened in that first interrogation scene. I think it was handled well enough. It's pretty forced that they're just like, yep, he switches on a dime. But I kind of, as we said before, I believe Mobius / Owen Wilson's performance here, that like, maybe this says more about the sort of the concerns he might have been having about the TVA overall. So yeah, it's a quick scene that gets us where we need to go, and I think that kind of worked for me.
I think like they try and do a little bit of like plot hole fill in a piece of dialogue. I can't remember exactly what he says, but when he comes back in, he's like, "Now, how certain are you that Sylvie hasn't been lying the whole time, or something like that?"
She didn't implant those memories, and
yeah.
To which Sylvie has said in the previous scene, I can't implant memories. I can only get what's there.
And so
Loki doesn't know that.
All
Owen
Owen Wilson has is Loki's word. He goes like, because I believe her. And he's like, well, that's good enough for me. And it's like, I can maybe buy that in some scenarios. I don't buy it with how this episode's played out so far. But, in a different version of how this episode plays out and the Loki-Mobius friendship is
if he hadn't
explored.
lied to him when he came out of the cell in the first time, then this would have totally played. The fact that the first words out of his mouth when he came out of the cell was a lie is like, right, because as soon as he did the did you kill her, blah blah blah, you're like, okay, we've hit the raw nerve, we've exposed the real person, the facade is dropped, blah blah blah, and you're like, cool, now I can believe what you're saying. But the fact that he lied, it's like, I don't know, you still...
Because therefore the shoe is on the other foot in the sense that Mobius should be able to be like, I'm sorry I doubted you because all you were trying to do when you came out of that cell the first time was tell me this.
Exactly.
And I didn't believe you. And it's like, well, you had a right to now. So, we do get that extra little line at the end, basically Mobius saying it's that nice thing that was in episode 1 where he's trying to be like a fan of Loki again. He's saying like, you could still be a good person if you want to be or whatever. Like I don't know. It was just this a sweet little look back into the idea that I think, Mobius is still rooting for Loki in the long run and maybe knows that he is always fated to fail, that sort of thing. They head through the elevator, but lo and behold, they are confronted by Ravona, who discovers her tempad's missing, and there's a little showdown there. I love, like you said before, Nick, this is probably the only memorable time for me in any film or TV show where a character gets jumped and it instinctively knows that they're caught and still tries to give the most natural, like, hey, how's it going? I've just got him out of here. We switched tempads. What's wrong? Like every other film and TV show, it's always like they do it so nervously or so bumbly, or they're like, well, what do you mean I got caught or something? He does it really convincingly. It doesn't help that he's kind of out of breath and they both burst through together and he's got handcuffs. And that's what ultimately undoes his little, ruse there. But in his performance, he's like, yep, I'm so sorry, I picked yours up. What's going on? I was convinced. I was like, Ravona has to be a cold-blooded judge to see through that. And so I thought that was really well done. Yeah. And ultimately she is, because she orders that he is pruned, but not before we get, I thought, a really lovely little performance from him with the knowing his time is up and he's trying to get all the words out before he's killed. We get a little callback to the jet ski magazine we saw in episode 2 where he's just like, what I would want to do is I would just want to ride my jet ski. And it's like, he's telling no one because someone's about to kill him or someone's about to prune him. And so that, along with the music swell, along with a bit of Hiddleston acting again, I was convinced by this bit. I read some people that were like, this didn't give it enough time for the character's death. But I'm like, no, the shorter it is, sometimes the more tragic it feels. And I thought it was great.
Totally.
And also, he's not dead. He's somewhere, but he's not like dead, so he'll be back. But I loved the shortness of it. It was like, I'm trying to get this thing out and then boom, disappears. And I was like, fuck me.
Yeah.
So my understanding of those rods leading up to this point, because like obviously we get the post-credit scene, but leading up to this point, I was like, if you get rodded, you're dead, gone.
Yeah, totally.
So like for me, like they killed him, and I was like, cool. That's like, I mean, that sucks because I love Mobius as a character, but it's like this, they didn't mess about. And it's like, it's in the same way that Loki's death in the MCU is him getting choked out of life. It's like, it's brutal. It's quick.
It's unceremonious.
Doesn't give you enough. Exactly. Unceremonious is like, it's such a effective way to get rid of a character that you love. You feel that betrayal and you feel that sadness. And I think they did a great job here.
Yeah, and it wasn't until they do it to Loki where I'm like, oh, okay, there's definitely more here. And then the post-credit scene, obviously. But in this moment, I'm with you. I thought he died, and I was like, no, this is exactly how you kill this character off, because you, like, even though it's sad that in that moment, I was like, it's sad that he's gone. That the harshness of it is the point. That's what it's supposed to not. It's supposed to feel like you wanted more.
Yeah, and it lands well because we've already had B-15 going. Like, I was happy. We know that B-15 is unlocked. As well. So we Owen Wilson has done a good job being the TVA agent that we liked through this first 4 episodes, and now we know that we've got B-15 to kind of take over that mantle of being like, here's the insider that's going to help the goodies like defeat the baddies.
Totally.
And so Owen Wilson did that character served its purpose through the story, and it's nice to put a full stop on that rather than making a 6-part series about a character that already died, kind of thing.
Even though I'm fairly certain we're going to see him again.
It might be.
Well, but
might not be
the
till
point
the
is they
very
made a
end,
Loki
but
show.
yes. Yeah, exactly. Can I just say at the end of this whole series, I'd like to have the quotes, or the really out of context quotes that have come out of these little callback episodes. Obviously, the famous one from the episode where we said that chewing gum could have appeared in any apocalypse. This one I'd like to give to Pete, which is like, here's my understanding of these rods so far. I was just like, the fact that you deep dived and drilled into like, here's my understanding, my technical understanding of these rods and how they work. Because we talked about them before, the fact that they look like they're really lethal and they're just hanging on everyone's hips. So this is the mind-blowing revelation that I talked about at the start of the episode was an understanding of said rods. So we'll get more into that. We then see that Loki and Sylvie are taken by Ravona back to the elevator to head to a confrontation or a meeting with the Timekeepers. On the way there, Sylvie asks Ravona what it was that she did that caused her to be, plucked out of her timeline, to which Ravona replies that she doesn't remember. She clearly does. I think we can all agree that there's, she knows she is possibly the big bad in all of this, or at least a stepping stone to find it. And so I think at that point by killing Mobius, she's lost all guise of being a, I think, I don't know, a sympathetic character, all that sort of stuff as well. They arrive before the Timekeepers. We get to see them again in full light, and again we get this kick-ass little neon set, which I really enjoyed. The set, I think the scene that follows is pretty clunky, and we'll get into that in a moment, Nick. I can see that. But what happens is
I don't think Nick even likes the set.
The Timekeepers are these imposing space lizards with incredibly hard to understand voices. Did you turn your subtitles on for that?
Yes, I watch everything with subtitles on regardless.
Good. There was some weird voices and all that kind of stuff. The Timekeepers give off the aura of being all powerful, all almighty, all knowing, all that kind of stuff as well. There's kind of a shout off between the two of them. Sylvie's just not threatened by them, blah, blah, blah. And eventually, just before they're executed, we see Hunter B-15 has appeared, has disabled their collars, and arms up the two Lokis, or Sylvie and Loki, who proceed to have a really clumsy, really awkwardly choreographed fight in said set. Which, again, I found this super strange sweeping camera panto style, little help, throw me a sword kind of stuff. Really, really clumsy. And as a confrontation scene with the Timekeepers, Nick, why did this not work for you?
I can't even count the ways. I hated everything about this scene. Really? When I saw the Timekeepers, I was like, I'm out. I am fucking out of this show. This Muppet-ass TV show. Thank God they're robots, because it was just because I think what the trick of the Marvel
I love
universe...
that this is a spoilerful thing, but then you're like, thank God they're robots. Just
I think it's that the trick that the Marvel universe has so effectively pulled over the last decade and a half, or however long it's been, is taking really dumb things and making them feel believable. And the idea of superheroes and people in costumes and aliens, and you kind of just, for 90% of it, I'm like, no, this feels grounded and serious, and I get it. And then this just felt like a 90s superhero movie or something, with these aliens floating in the and I instantly got the questions of things like, okay, so what do you guys eat? Like, do you just sit here 24 hours a day? Like, it was that sort of thing of just going, this is too, it's all too choreographed. It's too pomp and circumstance. And so then the fact that it's revealed that they're androids, it's like, okay, I get that. But then I'm like, everyone who believed this is a fucking idiot. And so
yeah, I'm totally of the mindset that, like, when I saw them, I was like, this is weird. This raises more questions. You're right. How did they eat all those? But like, what is their purpose like this? And the revelation that when Sylvie throws a sword, that they are mindless androids works for me, because I'm like, that's exactly what they were. They were made to be built up like, Wizard of Oz style, scary, imposing creatures that are meant to instill fear in people that have to be confronted by them. So that's their purpose. Like, it worked for me.
Yeah, I totally hear that. It's going to be interesting next week to see Ravona, what happens with Ravona, because I think that's the key. If she doesn't know that there's clearly someone else behind this, I don't think it's her. So and the theory out there is that it's Kang. But if there's another someone else pulling the strings, because someone need to have built those androids, then it's like, okay, I get why those androids needed to be there. But if she knows all that stuff, if she is aware of that, it's kind of like, I just feel like this is kind of, how do I put it? It's the fact that the show, everything about the show is so, like, the bureaucracy of the Timekeepers is so plain. Like, they're all just office workers and that sort of thing. So the fact that there's a room in this building where 3 floating aliens are determining the fate of the universe, and they all say that. And it's like, okay, cool, I get that. But then you go in there and there are 3 floating aliens determining the fate of the universe, even though they're androids. It's like, I would have preferred that room to be empty, because because it's like
or 3 big servers or something.
Totally, yeah, something where it's not like stupid. It's okay for people to believe the stupid thing because they haven't seen it, but the fact that they also show them the stupid thing, and so then it means that everyone, like, if Ravona doesn't know that they're fake, and she's gone in there, that means she's gone in there and she believes what's going on in this room. And I'm like, I don't, like, this is, again, I'm nitpicking, but it's just like, this feels tonally really dumb compared
it's
to
tonally,
the rest
it's
of
for
this.
The audience, because it's for the audience, because I do agree with what you're saying, in the sense that, like, now that I think about it, the idea of going into a room and just seeing 3 sets of glowing eyes in the dark that have a voice, like, that's enough of it to be imposing, and that's enough of a sort of fake setup that you need to have to convince anyone that's brought down there to scare them. And that would lean more into the Wizard of Oz style, like, they were never real to begin with. But the idea that they are built, designed, and made to look entirely real is purely, I think, now that I think about it, for the fact that this is a show and we are an audience, and we need to have that moment of going in there going, oh, they were real? No, they're not. And it's like, that wouldn't have been as effective if it was an empty room, 3 large glowing sets of eyes or something, because it wouldn't have had the level of Marvel that we've come to expect, I guess. So I entirely agree with what you're saying. But I guess I was simpler in my enjoyment of what happened, because I am the audience and I was tired.
Yeah, it's also like, like, it's easy to go like, space lizards are a stupid idea, but like you just saying that just now has made me think, like, why is the TVA only humanoids? Like, we're kind of in Star Wars territory where, like, we've seen what's Ben Mendelsohn in, what's his race called in the MCU? They've got
Australian.
Oh, yeah, right. Sorry, Ben Mendelsohn is a human. Ben Mendelsohn's character in all the Captain Marvel stuff. Whatever that.
Sorry, the green.
Aliens exist. The point is, aliens exist in the MCU.
Krull.
Yeah. There's none of them at the TVA. There's no anything else at the TVA. There's maybe, like, I don't know. I don't think we've seen anything other than a human work there, right? So it's like, it's the idea that every human is like, has never seen an alien, or that there's only 3 aliens in existence and they run everything. It's like, it's all just like, it doesn't speak to this broader universe. It's like,
no, and I think that's what made it. That's a good point. That's what made it really weird, because I was like, I would buy if there were people. If there were people here doing this would be less weird. Because also, we've never, like, we go to all these alien worlds, but or these alternate dimensions or whatever, like that moon that we were on. But it's like, they were still all humans there. The only timelines being pruned are humans. And then you go, but the human timeline is being pruned and directed by aliens, and no one went, hang on, do we think that the aliens have our best interest at heart? Like, why are there not aliens being pruned constantly? Because it's a universal timeline. It's just the human timeline. So when we walk in there and we see aliens, it's like, what the fuck? Like, how can anyone who has ever worked at the TVA who has seen these people not go, something is sus?
And on top of that, the idea that from the beginning of this series, we've been told that no one really sees the Timekeepers. Owen Wilson doesn't see them. You know, it's like, so, but from your perspective,
because I was going to say, but then 5 people walk in there. It's not just Ravona. It's not just guards Ravona. Walk in there.
That's true. There were guards in there. There were guards in there when they came in, standing there.
Exactly.
So, I mean, we're jumping ahead a bit here, but the idea is that obviously maybe this storyline, maybe this whole TVA thing needs to be a human enslaving other humans using the guise of robots and all this other stuff. So, like, maybe it is a centralized focus story, and therefore, the ultimate threat needs to not be Kane, but it does need to be someone who wants to pluck humans out, get them to maybe those windows that look out into the actual TVA are just, screens that flicker off. Like, this whole thing could be just the plot of some maniacal human or earth-based being that wants to just like run this section of time. So whether or not that's it, or Disney budget constraints, and they're like, no, everyone has to be human because you're just humans in grey rags on this planet. So, we'll find out going ahead.
That was part 1 of what I hated about this scene. Part 2 was the fight scene, which is incredibly, and I think the reason being that it just feels like there's bad choreography. So from a production standpoint, which I know not everyone who listens to this works in production, so it might be less interesting to them. From a production standpoint, choreography awful. It just feels clunky. I hated the fact that from a character standpoint, there is that thing of like, oh, catch, like coming in, throw a weapon, everyone stops fighting for a second while someone gets away. But then again, at the power of these rods, these weapons that we've seen wielded with so much just like callousness and genuine fear around the fact that you could disappear anyone, and they're all fighting with them, and no one gets zapped through this thing, and they're constantly getting hit with the other end of the rod, and I was just like, oh. This just feels like cheap TV now, because you've taken the thing that I'm supposed to be scared of, and everyone has suddenly turned into Donatella from the Ninja Turtles.
It's a weird kind of result of how they obviously shoot these scenes, how they use the main actors probably with lesser stunt doubles and say, hey, we can get really good shots of everyone with big sweeping angles. But it does result in rather clunky, as I said, sort of panto fight scenes, especially from a series or from, the fact that Marvel has gotten so good at of making action engaging and interesting to watch. Not just hard, shaky cam in the middle of it all, but actually a spectacle. And while I think maybe the set design and the lighting and everything was trying to lead it to be that kind of spectacle, it didn't pay off in the actual choreography and the way these actors tried to make this fight convincing. Similar kind of thing, Nick, I found, is that eventually Sylvie punches Ravona and knocks her out, and so she's lying on the floor as a little like, she wasn't killed or she wasn't.
I'll be back later.
I'll be back later kind of thing, which is clumsy in a narrative sense, because we'll push through this scene in terms of the fact that after chopping the head off the Timekeepers. The one thing I did really like, even though I do agree with all your points you make about them actually being physical entities now as these 3 lizard robot creatures, when the head gets cut off, I thought it was quite haunting that the other 2 kind of go into this like laugh cycle and kind of power down. Like, that was cool. Like, that was the only bit that made me go like, this is creepy as.
It was like the Pirates of the Caribbean ride malfunctioned.
Totally. That was cool. But yes, straight after that, they realized that the Timekeepers
I think Nick was not saying that's cool.
That's cool.
It does imply
the Timekeepers break down.
To me, the good thing that did was imply that whatever the greater power is was watching that. That wasn't. I mean, I guess it could be programmed into the fucking code of these lizards to laugh when one of them gets cut up. But but like, to me, the implication is that whatever the puppeteer is in control of that was at least in the room and witnessing in some way what was happening.
Like, you thought you got me and you didn't, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It
was spooky a little bit.
It is creepy.
We get like a disheartened, disillusioned Loki who who stands at the camera and goes, "Then who created the TVA?" This like wonderful line that is essentially, we were all thinking it, mate, but thank you for saying it out loud.
Exposition?
Exposition ? He there's some very truncated character development or even plot development here in which he questions who built the TVA. Sylvie looks disheartened as well. Loki then says, well, we're going to get to the bottom of it. It's an endless loop, but we'll work it out. And I know we will because and there's this final wants to admit the affection he has for Sylvie, even though it's a weird, incestuous, masturbatory, whatever it is. But of course, that moment's cut short as he is rotted in the back by Ravona, who was just slightly knocked out. So convenient kind of, or contrived play out, whatever you want to call it, leading to the end of the episode in which Loki himself is pruned, evaporated, whatever you want to call it. And then very quickly, Sylvie just takes control over, threatens Ravona with the rod, leaving the episode on the line. I want to know, you need to tell me everything, which we are not going to get in one episode, but yeah.
I liked the pruning moment.
Yep.
Like as it comes through him, I thought that was good. And
didn't
he disappears.
Didn't whip his hair hard enough when he got pruned.
Yeah, I agree.
No, he didn't. I'm literally watching it right now, and the Sylvie acting is just awful. She kind of just goes, and her eyes widen as he disappears, and then she just goes, all right. And it's like, okay. So he's wildly in love with you, and you were like,
I have no strong feelings one way or the other.
Totally. It's just like, again, it just felt like that character just in every moment is just a disappointment.
It is. And yeah, a bit of a, I guess not a disappointing ending, but a cliffhanger as usual in all these episodes, which I imagine they should be doing considering there's only, I guess, 8 of them in total? Maybe a few more, but 10. Maybe it's 10. So yeah, we're left on the cliffhanger there. That is the end of the episode credits roll. Great little song choice at the end. I really enjoy these. I know it's a weird thing to mention, but there was like a kind of eerie sort of 40s swing song, or not swing, but like love ballad playing over the end titles, which I thought was quite effective.
I just want to say it's only 6 episodes.
Oh, it is.
So
there we go.
Yeah.
We've got 2 to go. But for the first time, we got a post-credit scene here, which has whipped up a lot of frenzied speculation and screen grabs on the internet.
You have to warn me when that happens. Like, I didn't know until you guys said it last night, and then I had to go watch it. You got to warn me if you're going to put a post-credits thing in there.
Totally.
Don't, and you've never done it before. Don't just hide it.
Particularly because these credits in particular are kind of, post-credits are long and a bit boring.
Yeah, the Marvel TV show credits are like 7 minutes long, so you're just like, I need to get out of this right now. Yeah.
Well, I think this is what happened with possibly maybe WandaVision and maybe... I think they started doing post-credit scenes later in the series, so they weren't in the first episodes, but they did start peppering them throughout. Here, we are instantly ripped back to the idea that Loki has not died and has woken up in some kind of apocalyptic ruins place where there's crumbling buildings, all this kind of stuff. He questions whether or not it's hell, and he is then the voice of the voices of other characters saying, you need to come with us to find out. I forget what the line is.
If you want to live.
Something along those lines, and we get a shot of...
He says, not yet, but you will be unless you come with us.
There you go. And we get a shot of the other Loki variants in this area. We've got Black Loki with a hammer, who I thought was Thor originally. You've got Kid Loki. You've got Crocodile Loki. And you've got Old Man Pants, Richard E. Grant Loki, which is one of the weirder of the variations, which is a big thing to say considering one of them's a crocodile. But the one that really got me was cosplayer Richard E. Grant Loki.
This was definitely because I think I didn't know about the post-credit scene, and then we were talking last night, and you guys were like, "Did you see what about the post-credit thing?" I was like, "What?" And then Pete's like, "Oh yeah, you missed Richard E. Grant in a $3 costume." And I laughed very heartily at that. However, I will say that the costume he is wearing is actually the original way that Loki was drawn, and so I think they're deliberately going for shit. Particularly because like boastful Loki with the hammer looks awesome. So Richard E. Grant might be some completely like theatrical out of
I think that
style Loki,
the idea of painting a broader picture of these other Lokis you need the whole spectrum. You need the whole gamut of you've got kick-ass action Loki, you've got an animal version of Loki, and you've got this. He's the character I'm the most interested to find out more about. And in terms of cliffhangers or post-credit scenes go, I thought this was cool because I'm ready to dive into some of that batshit nature of multiverse, other Lokis, the stuff we got teased in episode 1 when we saw the holograms of all the other variants. So fingers crossed they deliver on that in terms of actually showing that and not going that was a misdirect and now we're heading back to the TVA to do more paperwork in next episode. So I imagine similar thoughts from you guys.
I am genuinely excited to see what happens here. I've got some questions which will be answered next week about is this a universe? Is this a Loki-verse? When you get pruned, do you go to a universe where all the people who are pruned are, or do you go to your own exactly all your variants are there? So are we going to see Owen Wilson here, or is Owen Wilson in an Owen Wilson dimension where everyone?
Which I would watch the hell out of. Wow, on a jet ski.
And also interesting that the scene behind them actually is a demolished Avengers Tower. So this is
I missed that.
Like a post-apocalyptic New York City.
Gotcha.
So there's interesting stuff that will happen here because
potentially interesting stuff.
I was about to say because they're writing themselves a really big check. And I was like, but they've done that before with the premise of this show and have whiffed quite consistently. But
whether or not
this at least feels the most like the sort of time alternate dimension show that I thought this was going to be. So
you think that, and then next week's episode where we just follow Hunter B-15, who slowly does paperwork to work out where everyone went and how she's going to be remunerated for the damages she's caused. What a misdirect. So a lot to look forward to in next week's episode of Loki and in next week's episode of PocketWatch, where we will pull apart all of those revelations or whatever is revealed to us then. That is it for this episode of PocketWatch, however, and we will be back next week to pour over more spoilers, speculations, whatever we can pull out of another episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you guys did enjoy the show and are listening to this as a podcast, we'd really appreciate it if you guys could leave us a review on your podcasting platform of choice. Or better yet, please recommend this show or any of the other content we make to friends, family, people who might enjoy some stuff that comes out of the Back Pocket family of shows and content that we do make. And you can find all of that by heading to backpocket.gg, find all our socials, all our other shows, YouTubes, etc. It's heaps of fun. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Pete. I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you, Angus.
I'll see you guys in the office, but we'll make it sound like this will tie nicely into next week. And this is where I ramble.
We're recording another show in an hour and 45 minutes.
That is true. Well, I'll see you guys then, and we will catch you guys later. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you then. Bye. I'm here.